let's start in Gig Harbor. Who are you? Where do you live? How long have you lived in Washington State? And how involved in politics are you?
So my name is Otter. I'm a college student. I work full time. I live in Gig Harbor. I've lived in Washington my whole life. I've lived in Gig Harbor since I was probably like 4. I'm really from Renton. Is there anything else I don't really?
Oh, how involved in politics are you?
So I'm pretty involved in my local politics. Like I've done sign waving, I've done foam baking, my mom's involved with postcards to voters. I help her with that occasionally, but I have atrocious handwriting, so I can't do that all the time. But I am involved online mostly, but I do local politics stuff occasionally.
Awesome. Sometimes it's good to get a postcard from someone with that handwriting, because then I'm like, oh, this person's like me.
Makes you feel better.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's just move over here. Can you introduce yourself? How long have you lived in Washington? How involved in politics are you?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Ian. I've lived in Washington my entire life. I grew up in Olympia and then went to college in Pullman and came back and settled in Everett area, currently in Lake Stevens. I'm not truly like significantly involved in politics. I help out occasionally locally, but I'm definitely voting every time. So
every time, primaries, special elections?
Yep.
Oh, awesome. Great. Cool. Good. Okay, let's keep moving.
My name is Eliav. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, or the Republic of Boulder, and moved out to Washington and to Seattle about 12 years ago. And I was never, ever involved or interested in politics in any way, shape, or form. And in 2020, ended up having the opportunity to meet Andrew Yang and spent a lot of hours with him and learned about ranked choice voting and our different systems and the challenges with of how different states work with their senators. And after that, I was like, all right, I'm wildly excited about moving the country forward, and got heavily involved in helping ranked choice voting across the United States and raising money for that. So I ended up at all these fundraisers and different fascinating things of trying to kind of shift the way of our political system so that we can get better candidates in. And now I'm just, yeah.
Awesome. I haven't heard Andrew Yang's name in a minute since he ran for New York, so I'm glad we got his name back in there. And yeah.
I'm Iskra Johnson. I'm an artist by profession, but I spend at least 30% of my time doing different kinds of political work. The most fulfilling kind of work I've done has been simply conversations. I believe that politics is the art of conversation. One of the things I think is most missing is that our elected representatives don't really talk with people. So I've spent a lot of time talking to candidates who are running long before they're elected, trying to share my perspectives on issues. And that has been very helpful, because once people are elected, it's very hard to connect with them in any real way. I was raised in a very political family. Both parents were journalists, both were activists, but there were 2 households, so I went back and forth between the inner city in Seattle and a pony farm in the Auburn, Enumclaw area.
Awesome. Great. It is also sometimes even hard for me to talk to elected officials, so I feel your pain. Moving on. Same question. I guess I don't need to keep repeating it.
Hi, I'm Jason. I have lived in Seattle for about 10 years, originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I would say I'm fairly involved with politics. I've been to a handful of city council meetings. I have voted in every election since I was able. I've donated. I have gone down a bit of the political podcast rabbit hole recently, and so I almost watch politics as sport. So I'm not always proud of that fact, but
you're hardly alone. And not to plug, but we just launched a politics podcast here at KUOW called Sound Politics. So if I'm one of the co-hosts. Just a little personal plug there. Okay, last for this first question. Who are you? Where do you live? How long? And how involved in politics are you?
So I'm Aaron. I've lived in Kirkland, Washington for about 4 years, ever since the pandemic really began. And how involved am I in politics? Growing up in Arizona, something that I really took for granted is even before the pandemic, Arizona was a state where you would be able to do mail-in ballots. So ever since I was 18 in the state of Arizona, always got the mail-in ballots for primaries, the 2 years, the 4 years. So really that's what I feel brought me into it, getting that ballot in the mail every single time and sort of having it on my doorstep. That was something I realize now growing up in Arizona I really took for granted. But how involved am I today? Still vote every single time I get a ballot in the mail. Listen to Seattle Now podcast pretty much every morning and evening.
Awesome.
Not this morning because they're on break right now. Yeah. But yeah, not too much of phone banking or canvassing or things like that, but definitely keep up with the news, keep up with podcasts, I'd say.
Awesome. I love how many regular, like every time voters are here. A lot of people I talk to don't even know there was a special election or even an August primary sometimes. Okay, so Aaron, we're going to start with you now, and we're going to move back that way on the second question. When did you first vote, and who for? And how have you changed since your first vote?
Let me think about that. So if you're asking me who for, I'd have to go back and think a little bit.
Yeah. It took me a moment when I thought about this. We could move on to Jason and come back to you if you
No,
want to
I would think the first person that definitely comes to my mind that I am 100% confident that I can say I voted for was Gary Johnson in the 2016 not even the primary, just the 2016 presidential election. And honestly, now that I think about it, he had a little rally at the Hilton in Arizona that I did go and visit at the time. That's really when I would say I got into politics initially. The 2016 election, there was so much happening back and forth, obviously with Trump and Hillary Clinton, but really for myself, it was finding that third option, that third candidate, Gary Johnson, that really spoke to me.
How have you changed since then, if you have?
I would say my politics pretty much have stayed the same since 2016, honestly. Really always thinking about not who is the option one or option two, the left option, the right option, who's the option that represents me the best on the ballot. So definitely still have a libertarian streak to me, I would say. But in general, always thinking about not thinking in the dichotomy sort of perspective, but who do I find that really speaks to me?
Jason, how about you? First vote, who for, and how have you changed since?
Feels a lot longer ago than it was. So 2004 was the first presidential, and I had to look up who that was because I forgot. It was John Kerry versus versus Bush Jr. And so I was raised in a very strongly Democratic, partisan household. My parents kind of celebrated the fact that they voted party ticket. And so I voted Democratic in that election and subsequently have in every other presidential election. And I'm a bit more up for grabs this time.
Okay. Do you want to say any more about that, up for grabs?
I don't know. I guess I view politics as kind of a spectrum, and between conservatism and liberalism and progressivism, like where you decide to kind of get off and feel like we've kind of like I'm good. I don't know, and again, that's a very myopic perspective, but almost just where you decide to step off of that continuum, and that's kind of where I'm at personally.
Okay. Iskra, am I saying that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a good many decades more of voting than all of you, and I would challenge any of you to remember. I have no memory of when I first voted. I remember the church basements and the smell of them and the ancient people working there. And then I remember working there after 9/11 at the St. Joseph's. And that, I think, might have been one of my very early experiences of real patriotic feeling. The only way you can rebel when you're raised by political activists is to meditate, burn incense, and do all those things from the 60s and 70s that have come back to bite us and destroy our culture. So I was too busy doing that until about 2000.
Okay. And have you changed since that first vote?
Yes. As I've seen the policies that I sort of reflexively supported fail on every possible level, I am passionately politically involved now. And I probably read 20 news sources a week or more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. Eliav, did I say that right?
Yep.
Okay. First vote. Who for? How have you changed?
It was 2000. I was in high school as a senior, and it was Al Gore versus Bush. And I was so confused of how my candidate could have gotten all the votes of the popular vote and still lost. And I was extremely confused and didn't really understand why this whole electoral college even existed. And fast forward, and I grew up in a really Democratic household. I grew up in Boulder. Everyone was pretty much a Democrat in Boulder. I mean, that was kind of, it's kind of like Seattle. It's always blue pretty much. And as things have changed, I've moved very much independent, where now at this point, I really actually don't care whether someone is a Republican or a Democrat. What it's come down to now is someone a flip-flopper? And I know normally people would say, like, you don't want to vote for a flip-flopper. They're changing their opinion. But what I've found is that if someone is changing their opinion, it means they're going against the norm of their party, of those like 10 to 20% of those primary voters that are the hardcore of the party that are going to really pick that primary candidate. And if they flip and they go against it, there's a problem. I look at that as, hey, they're moving against their party in what they really believe. And if they're willing to flip and they flip-flop, it's that they go back to their party because they're forced into it, because otherwise they won't get reelected. And so I always, at this point, I actually vote for flip-floppers, funny enough, because they're trying. And then the second thing is I vote for people who are willing to, at some point, have changed a fundamental opinion at some point based on new information. And I look at my kids and I teach them, we teach them new information. You want them to make a new decision, but as adults or as, politics, you can't ever change your opinion. And so I just always ask all my city council members, anyone who's running, what is a fundamental thing you believed in growing up? And you learn something new and you change that opinion. I just want to know, as they learn new things, whether it's city council or as a senator or a committee, that they're going to be able to make a decision for the people, not necessarily just based on whether they're Democrat or Republican.
I can't wait to ask you about the governor candidates. Ian, same question. Am I saying that right, Ian?
Yes.
Yeah, same question.
First one I voted in was Obama. For
First time?
Yep. At the time I wasn't really politically involved, at like paying attention to stuff because I had just started going to college. And so I was like, well, hope and change, right? I like change. And so then went that route and I was like, okay, that wasn't the kind of change I was looking for. And eventually my politics kind of, I guess it went more central, independent, but as we see the spectrum moving, I've kind of stayed where I've been at, and the spectrum moved itself over. So I would say, not really sure. Other than that, the way that my politics evolved is more. I started actually reading and looking into the data of what people were saying and finding out that almost every time that I read an article, it was in some form a lie or structural lie. Something was changed to make people think a certain thing this way or that way, or whoever was, of course, publishing that material. And that really made me think much deeper about what voting meant and how I was going to be a part of that.
And is that kind of how you've changed since your first vote?
Right. Yeah. Mostly now I'll see what the person is saying and then I'll see what they're doing. And the doing is, I would say, much more important than the saying.
Okay. Otter. Same question. First vote.
Yeah. So I'm gonna blow your minds a little bit here, at least for some of you. I'm 19 years old. Okay. So my first election was 2022. So I actually registered when I was 17 and a half. And then I turned 18. So I voted in the primary at 17 and a half, turned 18 August 3rd. And then I was able to vote in the general whenever that happened, I think November. I don't remember the exact candidate. I feel like, was Derek Kilmer on the 2022 ballot?
In your district, yeah.
Yeah. So then I voted for Derek Kilmer, I believe. And by default, I don't think I've changed all that much in 2 years. Like, probably mentally I have. But, like, politically, I cannot have changed that much in 2 years. I feel like maybe I'm a little bit more willing to compromise. Just, like, put my vote behind somebody who's the close enough party, you know? So.
Yeah. Yeah. How has living in Washington shaped your political views? And I'm going to come back to you on that one.
So living in Washington, obviously we live in a blue state. Most people who reside here are generally left-leaning. I feel like that's the majority. But so since we live in a blue state, I was raised by people who are Democrats and or just generally left-leaning. So I guess generally just more the way that your parents raise you is kind of the politics you end up adopting, at least for me. So I guess living in Washington, I'm a little bit more left-leaning. I also feel like because we live in a blue state, we have like a lot more exposure to different ideas, more like saturation of information available to us. We're not burning books here. At least I hope we're not. Not that I've heard. So I don't know. I feel like I have more of a wiggle room to like explore and think about ideas for my own self rather than trying to follow what the mainstream says is generally acceptable. So.
Yeah. Ian, same question. How has living in Washington shaped your political views?
I think actually moving around Washington changed my political views. So I grew up in Olympia, which is, of course, the capital of the state and a very, very liberal location. And then moving to Pullman, I started getting different perspectives and, the reasons for their, opinions and whatnot. And that started actually making me think more deeply about the demographics of the state itself. So, of course, you see the mountain line is basically everybody close to the water in the Seattle area from Olympia up to approximately Everett area is the vast majority of the very, very liberal portion of the state. And then there's the rest of the state, which is much bigger space, which is mostly conservative, if you look at it. And seeing that made me understand that there's something interesting about how when you push people together, they tend to be a little bit more liberal. They tend to be more, interactive with one another. And so that their opinions are, I would say, allowed to change more because they're interacting with more people. Those people are pushing them in different directions. And I thought it was very interesting just how different people think just traveling 4 hours across the mountains, because they're completely different people when you start talking to them. And that actually made me more conservative, just like seeing why they thought what they did and, the reasons behind it. And some of them maybe didn't make sense to me at the time, but as I grew older, I began to realize that all these little pieces go together to form the whole of like the people that live here. It's not only these people should be dictating and only these people should be, whatever, the subjects of the dictates. It's these people have a point. Maybe we should all listen and start talking to one another as to why we have these problems. And maybe the people that we disagree with have pretty good solutions sometimes to some of the issues that we have.
Yeah. Eliav, same question. How has living in Washington shaped your political views?
So I'm a hot air balloon pilot, and I fly in front of Mount Rainier every day. And if you go out to Enumclaw, you'll see lots of farms and lots of signs and lots of really hardworking, amazing people. And we get the opportunity to both launch and land on these properties, and we meet a lot of people. And from meeting I'd never really met a dairy farmer. I'd never met, amazing horse trainers or people that take in abused goats and take care of them. And I found Enumclaw is a really conservative, as is the entire hot air balloon community for the most part. And so growing up in Boulder, that was very different, but I started to really see that the challenge that we have in Washington State is not necessarily whether my views have changed. The challenge really that I've found is that the opinion of the minority doesn't really necessarily matter, unfortunately, from a political point of view, from an election, in Washington state. So to give you an example, like the last time we had a Republican governor or a Republican senator was 84, 89, right? So if our, senators, even like Maria Cantwell, right? She's been there for a long time. The approval rating is like 16%, right? But an incumbent has a 94% chance of getting back in. So in the state of Washington, I guess that's how my views have changed. In the state of Washington, I don't really have a choice anymore. I don't have a choice, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, who that nominee is, because there aren't open primaries, that we're stuck with whoever it is who we get. And that's where I've kind of been frustrated with modern day politics is, why does the Democrats or why do the Republicans have to choose? Why, as an independent, don't I get that opportunity to choose a candidate? And I don't get to be involved in the primaries. And for me, that was frustrating. And so I think that's really where my political views have changed, is that I believe everyone should have that right, whether you're in Kentucky in a red state, or Alabama, or you're in Seattle. Everyone should have that right to be involved in the primaries, to pick those candidates, and to have multiple candidates where we can really choose from, to get moderate people that then are forced with the incentive to really cover the 51% of the people, of all folks in Washington state, not necessarily just the 10, 12% that are choosing our Democratic nominee based on the primaries. So it's been an interesting thing, and but I found amazing conversations with folks, and that's where I realized all these people want the same thing, and it's how do you give them those opportunities.
Iskra, how has living in Washington shaped your political views?
Okay, I want Eliav and Ayan to be president and vice president, just on their ability to talk to people. This is so beautiful what you both said. I love that. I think the idea of the West is really big in my mind. My grandfather was a silver miner in Wallace, Idaho, and he was a member of the Wobblies. The Wobblies were the International Workers of the World, very, very radical. There's a streak of individualism and anarchy in the character of the West. And there's also a sense of space. So my experience of going from Seattle and then to the farm, and then we would go to Eastern Washington to buy horses and trade horses, and we were the center of the Quarter Horse Association. The farm was 100% conservative. And my father was a liberal publisher in a conservative town. So it was just a fascinating setup of hearing all these different opinions. I think when I was much younger, I wrote off all the conservatives as quote unquote idiots, thought the liberals were right. And over the last 30 years, my respect for the farm and the people on the farm and the hunting and fishing and the idea of the West has just become kind of a spiritual piece of my life. I'm very involved in the movements to save Washington State's forests and the tree canopies and the urban forest. And I am passionately involved in the issues of affordable housing and how you shape a city. The urbanists control most of the dialogue here in Seattle about development, and they do not know what the idea of the West is. Much of what I think they're trying to impose on Seattle is an East Coast or big city story that has nothing to do with Western people. So,
yeah, I've never heard. I've really you put that in such an eloquent way. Thank you for sharing that. Jason, same question. How has living in Washington shaped your political views?
So I don't know how much of it is Washington, because I've been here a decade, a pretty formidable decade. I became a homeowner. I became a father. The old adage, I guess, if you vote Republican when you're 20, you're heartless. If you vote Democrat when you're 40, you're brainless. And so I don't know how much of it is, me just becoming a curmudgeon-y old 40-year-old. I don't feel that old. But I think it certainly moved me. And again, I don't know, I look at the Overton window, right, of where our politics are today. And I feel like what defines a liberal or Democrat has shifted pretty dramatically. I feel like I've relatively stayed in the same place. I have a lot of the same core beliefs that I had 20 years ago around same-sex marriage. And, generally I do identify probably more as a libertarian or independent now, because I think the government should stay out of most things that have to do with people's personal lives. And a lot of economic, social issues, I'd prefer them not to be as heavy-handed in as well. That can, manifest itself on both sides of the political spectrum. I guess if it's who I'm voting for, or if you were to plot me on a spectrum, I have certainly moved away from, I guess, the liberal or progressive end of that spectrum in that time period. Part of that is also kind of seeing what happens, I think, with unchecked democracy, where one party rule really does get to define a lot of the social norms and policies. And I think some of those have been unsuccessful in this city in particular. And I'm coming from Atlanta, right, where it's a bigger city. It actually has more homeless people. It has a lot of the same substance abuse issues that exist in every major metropolitan area. And I think they can just be handled in a different way. And I think it's been a big challenge in Seattle.
Yeah. Okay, Aaron, final. How has living in Washington shaped your political views?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to say, although I do live in Washington State, I've really only been in the Puget Sound area. Farthest east I've really gone is Snohomish, and farthest west I've really gone is Bremerton, now that I think about it. So this is even from like the Puget Sound perspective. I do live on the east side, and just seeing the way the east side lives, and then within Seattle itself, it's not night and day, but it is very much a dichotomy, I would say. Growing up in Arizona, something that, again, what's the right way to say it? Growing up in Arizona, really, it was a very, I don't want to say monolithic culture, but it was a very right-wing sort of culture. No matter where you went around the city, it was definitely a right-wing culture. The ethnic makeup was a lot of white people or Hispanic people. Here, what I really like about the Puget Sound area is so many people from not only all across the United States, but from all different internationalities, all different backgrounds, from Asia, Africa, Europe, absolutely everywhere. That's something that I've definitely noticed in Washington State. It kind of took me out of that, what's the right way to say it?
Bubble.
Like racial bubble. Yeah, that's a good way to say it, racial bubble, because that's the one thing I really do like about the Puget Sound region. So many different people coming from so many different backgrounds. Another thing that I've really noticed difference between the east side and Seattle itself is, as some other of the panelists have echoed, is sort of, what's the right way to say it? I guess the general word would be sort of like lawlessness, especially in Seattle itself. Growing up in Arizona, cops would pull you over for just like a broken taillight or anything. Here in Seattle, people can do anything in the carpool lane. People can steal openly. People can do drug use openly. People can drive a Hellcat in the streets openly. There's a there's a lot of things, and maybe that's just an Arizona thing where it was very more of a pro-police, pro-military culture. Here, people are more skeptical of the police, more skeptical of the military, I would say, and that sort of leans into more of like a skeptical view of the big power, the big powers that be, I would say. So when that comes to my own views, I feel like it's hardened me in some ways and then softened me in some ways to saying, okay, we can't have complete open lawlessness, but I do like some of the liberties that we do have in the Puget Sound when it comes to how open people can be with their LGBT identities or their ethnic backgrounds, things along those lines.
Yeah. That's a great bridge into the next question. I just want to double check how much time we have until 7.
We have until 6:30.
6:30. Oh, okay. Great. Well, we're just starting to get really into the meat of it. But you kind of provided us a bridge. Aaron, what's the number one policy issue driving your vote?
Honestly, I would say the number one policy issue.
In local elections, I'd say.
In local elections, it would be turning on the news and pretty much seeing that sometimes the law is not being applied 100%, honestly. I'll take the Miles Hellcat guy, for example. In other states, they would have just impounded his car pretty much immediately. I even saw videos of him on Reddit, like driving around like 24 hours ago. Sometimes when people are stealing openly, they're able to just get back on the streets again pretty easily. What's another good example? Or sometimes when, although people do actually have mental health issues, just sometimes the logjam in the government where the crime system is not as fluent and as and the gears are not turning as well as they should be. Another good example I could give is I saw recently that there were a lot of juveniles that one side sort of pushed over into the adult prisons. Now they're trying to push them back. There's this whole battle back and forth and all this time wasted back and forth when why don't we just spend all this time and money and effort trying to build a better system to make everything work better? I would say it's not so much. It's really that although, yes, the law can be written X on the book, the way that it's actually applied, the rules, the way that judges interpret them or people interpret them or police interpret them, it's completely a mishmash, I'd say.
You, believe it or not, are not the first voter to bring up the Hellcat, the Belltown Hellcat, in like how, your vote is being influenced. Jason, same question. What's the number one policy issue driving your vote?
I think they're related, but economics to a certain degree, and I'm thinking the gas tax and the carbon auction credit system. But I also agree, crime, public safety, feeling like you can walk down the street at night and not be accosted or step on a needle or a piece of foil or something. I walked out of a Staples a week ago with my 5-year-old daughter and a guy smoking meth sitting on the sidewalk. Nobody says anything. Nobody does anything. And I don't want to raise her in a place like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Iskra, same question.
I would say it's a hybrid because I think drug de facto decriminalization and crime go hand in hand. In my neighborhood, which extends the far north end, 7 people have been murdered 6 blocks from my house. That's a lot, and most people don't know about it. They don't know about the nightly shootings that go from 125th to 90th on Aurora and all the side streets. I have friends who have bullets in their houses on those side streets. Most of this nightly horrific crime is only covered on KUOW News and a few television stations, and the media has abandoned its duty to educate people about what is going on. Yeah, my family's been devastated by crime personally. I've had experiences with crime that changed my life. And I think that the Democrats have made a terrible misstep in allowing Republicans to seize crime as a Republican issue. Public safety is a human issue.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Eliav, same question. Number one policy issue driving your vote?
It's weird that there isn't actually a policy issue that helps decide what I'm going to vote for or who I'm going to vote for. Although I'm very serious about safety, and I had my child back when he was 2.5 picked up a razor blade in front of the library, and we didn't go to the Buren Library for a long time because there were multiple campsites in front of it, people dying. We had like 3 dying a month. And so, although it's important to me, I realize that we're in a blue state. A lot of those things just aren't going to change. And so I guess I feel kind of disheartened that whoever's in, there's not a lot of incentive to change and to make big impacts, only for the fact that if you solve something and you reach across the aisle and you work with someone else, it doesn't give you something to rah-rah your base around. If something isn't solved, you can rah-rah them all day long. And so I think the incentives have to change very much in our politics for those things to really change around public safety and around, and education is obviously important to me. So a lot of those that more democratic values in Boulder, where I grew up, which was like, hey, always pass education reforms, always, add money to this, always public safety. Those are all things that are really important to me, but I guess I don't necessarily know that my vote always really counts here right now, that it's going to make a huge difference based on the 1 or 2 policies.
Yeah. Thank you all for sharing these personal stories. I know they're very, intimate in a sense, but I really appreciate it because they very, very much help me get a sense of what you're feeling as you're filling out your ballot. Ian, same question. Number one policy issue driving your vote?
I'm going to say it's definitely going to be public safety because that relates to all of the other issues that I have with what's going on currently. So, I mean, I would say the issue is definitely more prevalent in the Seattle, Puget Sound area of like drug use. And I think it's personally abhorrent that like thousands of people are dying from overdoses and we're just like, oh, that's fine, we can deal with that. And then on the other side of that, we have the gun control stuff, and what is it, of murders, there's like maybe 200 to 300 murders, and it's been going up. And we ban rifles, which are statistically the least amount of murders happen with that firearm. So we see these like fixes for problems that are actually more Trojan horses to take away people's rights. And those kind of things where, you know, I mean, if you create a problem, then you can create fear in people so that they will then do what you want them to do because you're telling them, hey, look at this fix that I'm going to give you. And then actually that fix isn't really fixing it. It's just creating a worse problem later down the road. So within that, public safety is definitely my number one issue, just like across the board, just everything to do with that.
Yeah. Otter, number one policy issue driving your vote.
First of all, I just want to say all of you are so well spoken, and I feel so dumb.
Me too.
I don't know if that's a symptom of
Me
being
too.
like 19 years old, but whatever. Anyway, moving on. So my number one issue that I think about all the time when I'm voting is just general, more broadly, human rights, but it sounds like a majority of you want to talk about the public safety element of it. I think human rights and solving human rights issues can solve a lot of the underlying causes of homelessness, of drug abuse. If we start looking at homeless people, we start looking at drug addicts, we start looking at mentally ill people as people and treating them as ill people and patients, putting them in whatever level of care they need to be in, rather than, I don't know, running around giving money to the police thinking that they're going to solve it. I think that would solve a lot of the public safety issues. Obviously, no one should have to step outside and step on a needle. That shouldn't be the case, but there's nothing wrong with somebody who is a consenting adult, at least in my opinion, going and doing heroin somewhere where it is safe, they have a clean needle and a clean disposal. Nothing wrong with that, to me. I think they should absolutely be allowed to do that. They should be given education on why it's not good to do that, but anyway, I'm getting off into a tangent. But general human rights, I feel like, and backing ideas of let's get these people some houses, let's get these people a treatment, let's get these people clean places to shoot up, let's get these people some, help and resources. I also want to see more like time put into chasing landlords and making sure that the housing around here is actually affordable for people, not just affordable with an asterisk, affordable with a, certain set of conditions and caveats. I want to see that. I want to see us, committed to helping people rather than to just give money to the police infinitely.
So it sounds like for you, maybe treatment availability and rent caps or rent limits would be
to put it in
if a policy boxes.
To put it in a little box.
Yeah. Well, thank you all again for sharing your feelings and your experiences. So, I do want to talk about, there will be 4 initiatives on the ballot. Some of them have to do with some of what you've talked about already. I'll run through them really quickly. The first one would repeal Washington's recently established capital gains tax on the incomes of rich Washingtonians, or excise. They call it an excise tax. Some people argue it's an income tax. Another one would cancel the cap and trade portion of the Climate Commitment Act. Washington's cap and trade program is a carbon auction that sells the ability to pollute to industry. The money is used to fund climate change measures. The Washington Cares program began in 2023 and added a mandatory payroll tax to every worker in the state. The money is slated to pay for long-term care later in life. This initiative would make this tax optional. You could opt out of it. And then last one, I-2066. Sorry, I haven't been saying the numbers because I can barely keep track of them. But this last one would prohibit the state from banning or discouraging the use of natural gas. The state does not currently have a natural gas ban, but supporters of this new ballot measure have pitched it as a rejection of a potential ban. You don't have to talk about all of these. I want to know which initiatives are most important to you, if any, and why, and how you're planning on voting on them. If you haven't decided on some, that's totally fine. If there's one that really sticks out that you care a lot about, making sure it passes or making sure it stays, then I want to hear about that. Otter, what of those stick out to you, and do you really want to vote for or against?
So the one that has to do with gas and the credit exchange and stuff, I didn't mention it earlier because I feel like it doesn't apply to like local politics as much, but I am very much so into environmentalism. I think that sitting here and compromising with oil companies and gas companies and saying, "Oh, it's okay, you can go do awful stuff if you give us some money," that just seems, I don't know, that just seems like screwy to me, for lack of a better word. We shouldn't be compromising with these people. We should be saying, no, you should be doing what you're supposed to be doing without us having to buy you off. You know, that there's nothing, I don't know, I don't have a better solution for it. But I don't think that buying off oil companies or letting oil companies buy us off is a smart idea.
So do you think you'd vote to repeal that, the carbon auction?
I would have to read up about like the implications of that. Are we just going to appeal it with nothing in return? Are we just going to appeal it and we have a different plan? I'd have to read up on like the implications genuinely of that. But I think that, like I said, letting them buy us off is goofy, frankly. So.
Okay, interesting. Any others you want to mention before I move on?
I think the capital gains tax needs to stay. It's probably not a secret by this point, but I'm not a big fan of rich people. But so I think capital gains tax, it seems to be bringing in a lot of money, for the state. And I don't think there's any reason we should discontinue that.
Ian, same question. 4 initiatives. I know that's a lot. You don't have to talk about all of them, but which ones are important to you?
All of them. They're all important to me. Okay. I would say, for me personally, I would like to repeal every single one of them. And repeal the first 3, and then, of course, ensure that people can have natural gas if they choose to. The reason for that is, I'll go down the list. The carbon tax one doesn't actually set aside that money to build new renewable energy in any way, shape, or form. If we were using it to build new nuclear plants, then our energy bills would go down in the long run, and that would be a great thing for the state. But we're not even doing that. We're actually tearing down some dams, and actually in the short term, it looks like our energy prices are going to be increasing pretty significantly, especially with the data centers that are being put in Washington State, which is going to take more energy. So actually, we're just going to be constantly paying more and more and more. And then actually what we saw recently with Inslee going, hey, here's $200 back of your own money. And we're supposed to be happy about that we're paying $600, $800 extra a year and we get $200 back. Well, some people, of course, not everybody's getting that back. And then just within that, I want to see the state become a renewable energy giant. We can go out and we can build nuclear energy plants that are not polluting. They will add, tens of thousands of megawatts of energy to our grid that we can then sell to California or other states if we have excess energy. And so within that, I just think that it's much better to build things that don't pollute and then legacy take away the ones that do from that. Moving on, let's see. What was the second one?
Payroll tax.
Payroll tax.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Payroll tax.
Or capital gains tax.
Capital gains tax.
Yeah.
Actually, in this last Senate session, we had senators that tried to reduce the amount to $15,000 and then use that to fund universal health care in Washington State, which would also include an increase of the tax from, I think it's 7% now, and it would be increased to 8.5%. So they're already trying to reduce the amount. So eventually we're all going to be paying this tax anyway, if it stays. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. It's Washington State. We have dominated by Democratic policies. So it's going to happen. Moving on from there, we have the
Washington Cares,
the CARES
long-term
Act, which I currently have a grandfather that is in long-term care, and this would not even pay for a full year of it. It wouldn't pay for 1 year. So we're going to be paying this tax until we retire, and it won't even pay for a year of our care if necessary. So it's,
and the last one is the natural gas ban.
yeah, and that one's more just choice. I mean, people should have a choice of the energy source that they want to use, and natural gas is a relatively clean source of energy, ultimately. So banning it and putting more strain on our electric infrastructure when we're trying to electrify everything. We're trying to make our ferries electric. We're trying to make all the cars electric. Like, why take away an energy source when we're doing that? It doesn't make sense.
Eliav, same question for initiatives.
I am totally fine with the auction of tax credits. I believe that the world is moving towards sustainability, and there's a pressure and push on organizations and companies to become sustainable. And the ones that aren't able to do it fast enough, if they're able to sell those tax credits to other organizations, I don't have any problem with that whatsoever. Do I believe in renewable energy? Obviously, I'm a balloon pilot. I got to go hydrogen ballooning in Germany this year. I learned that Germany has hydrogen pipelines throughout the entire country and are best set up for renewable energy. And in Eastern Washington, we do have a giant hydrogen plant going in. So I do believe that hydrogen is the future of the country as a clean energy source. I'm a business owner. We went with Seattle Ballooning, we have about 30 employees. We used to be all independent contractors. And during last year, we had a conversation where they moved everyone under unemployment insurance and moved us into an actual code. Under kind of like the airlines. So you have like a hot air balloon pilot is kind of like an airplane pilot, and our crew is kind of like baggage crew. Payroll taxes are really expensive. And if anyone has ever had a business and all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, how much of our money is going to this? It's a ton. It's so much every single month. And so for me, what's interesting is if I have the option, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but anyone who is a business owner, if you have the option not to pay a payroll tax, unless you are absolutely committed 100% to whatever that is going to, if it's an option, no one will pay it. But the people who are really excited about that option, who want to contribute, will. And I think that's really hard. So for me, if it's an option, to be honest, will I probably opt out? Yes, because it's just going, hey, where else can I put that money towards employees? How can I pay my employees more? How can I take care of them better? How can I give them more opportunities versus paying for something else? And then I think on the capital gains.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand. So you will vote to make it optional.
I will vote to make it optional, and I believe that the business owners will, if they have a choice, they'll go, do I believe in that as an initiative? If it is something I believe in, an initiative in public health and in those pieces, then I'm going to support it if I can. But I would say most of us who use accountants and who, are professional business owners really do our best to, how can we save money? How can we write up the things that make sense that we're able to, so that we can take care of our employees as best as possible. And I believe that we can put that money towards our employees and their wages versus it going to that. If I have the option, of course, I'm going to do that.
Sorry, I cut you off when you were talking about capital gains.
Capital gains. I do have a lot of friends that are very, very wealthy. Do I believe that capital gains of taxing super wealthy people is going to make all the difference in the world? No, I don't. If Washington State wants to do, we want to do income tax, great. You want to find a way where there's evenly across the board of where we're funding different programs, I think that's fine. I don't think just capital gains tax is going to make all the difference. So
you think you'd vote to repeal it?
I do. I don't think, yeah. And now, again, my mother-in-law is on the extreme liberal side, so she'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe Eliav's saying this. But, it's a really fun household to be in. Lots of great conversations.
Your family's not here. They may never hear this, or maybe they will. Who knows? Great. Okay. Moving on. I should say that income taxes there was an initiative that didn't end up on the ballot that Democrats did pass after the Republicans proposed it, but it did ban income taxes. So there will not very likely ever be an income tax in Washington State, unless you consider capital gains an income tax. Iskra, same question. Those four.
Yeah. I'm just going to focus on one.
Okay, great.
I was a take no prisoners, rabid environmentalist for most of my life. Back there when I was burning the incense, I was a rabid environmentalist. And I would have said all oil companies are evil, and I would have been, and I was, the person with a sign in front of the coal trains. And I've had so many interesting conversations, including with a man. I document construction sites as part of my artwork. And they ended up having a long conversation with a man who'd been a fracker. And I just very deeply affected because I went, I've been demonizing the entire industry and the people who work in it, and I'm going to rethink that. And I would have, 20 years ago, beaten up on any politician who said he wanted all of the above as a mealy-mouthed compromiser. I absolutely think we need all of the above. I think there's a streak of elitism and classism in the way that the technocrats have said we all have to have an electric car. We've anointed certain kinds of energy as golden. And back to the idea of the West, it is heartbreaking to drive across eastern Washington and imagine it covered with solar plates, not to see the land, not to see wild horses, not to see an old-fashioned windmill, but to see science stretching as far as it can go with windmills that kill birds like crazy. The toxic idea of the West that we are all enthralled with is the idea that you can have infinite use of the land and infinite progress and that there's no limits. I think we have limits, and I want us to look at limits. In the meantime, I never thought I'd say this. I think we do need to look at safe nuclear. Does it exist? How could we do it? I think we need hydropower. And I think we need to look at the dark side of what's happening, how you build a solar plate, what's happening in those mines where we get cobalt to fuel our phones. It's dirty and it's exploitative, just the way gas and oil are.
So just so I understand, you would repeal the carbon auction. Vote to repeal.
I'm talking about the right to have gas, not the other one. The
cap and trade portion of the Climate Commitment Act.
No, I was talking about the ban on gas.
I'm sorry. You
No, I'm directly saying I think we should be able to have gas.
This one I'm still working into because it just recently ended up that it's going to be on the ballot, so I'm still working it into my paradigm. And sorry, I immediately thought you were talking about the carbon auction. My bad.
The carbon auction is so complicated that my decision right now is let it go and do its thing for another year and then assess it.
Okay. So you won't be voting to repeal it?
I'm going to wait and see what my hand does on the ballot.
Great. Love it. I love it. Great. Jason, same question. 4 initiatives. What's important to you? How are you going to vote?
Okay. I believe the market is a pretty incredible force, and I think left to its own devices generally will net a pretty positive outcome. Carbon tax credit, I think, has been a total blunder. It has not delivered any tangible benefit to the environment. We also live in a global environment, and what we do in Washington State has a marginal impact at best. We're also very reliant on hydropower, and we should use the resources that we have available to us. We also have the most expensive gasoline in the country, and everyone admits that at least it is partially responsible for that. So I would vote to repeal the tax credit. To Eliav's point, there is enough incentive and market force pushing companies to try to be more environmentally sustainable and responsible. That is naturally occurring on its own, and I think the market itself will come up with the right solutions to that if allowed to play itself out. Are there trade-offs? Absolutely. I think Washington Cares is an absolute joke. I think you actually have to use it within a year. It basically has a lifetime cap, I believe, of $36,000. And so I can pay into this every paycheck for the rest of my career, and I will burn through that in about 6 months in an assisted living facility. And I would rather have that money be invested and earning capital for me under my own direction than having it basically pay for people's care today. And that's selfish, but that is my money. And so I think I could do better with it than basically having no return on that investment over the rest of my career. Sorry, what was the other one?
Oh, capital gains.
Yeah, it's not an excise tax. I mean, excise tax is a tax applied to a manufactured good at the time of manufacture. And I think it's a wordsmithing legal loophole to get that considered an excise tax to get around the income tax restriction. And I think that's just one of many that will be tested out. And so we pay, a lot of state sales tax here. I'm not affected by this personally, but I think you will also see a lot of capital leave the state. And you already have. So
you'll vote to repeal.
Yeah.
All right, Aaron, same question. You can pick all of them. You can pick one. You can pick two.
Yeah, so the two that I definitely focus on or think that I am pretty set in my ways on are the capital gains repeal, which I would vote to repeal, and then also the WA Cares opt-out, which I would like people to have the option to opt out. Again, as some other people have echoed here, you can call it an excise tax. You can call the WA Cares, I believe legally, the court said it was a fund or something, but that doesn't change the fact that when you go and you make an income in some way through the capital gains or through the payroll, and you go in there and you see for example, the WA Cares, the 0.58% taken out of your paycheck week after week after week, it really hits you that this is an income tax in some way. And I feel like, to me, that kind of goes back to the way that some things are written into the Washington State Constitution such that there's not supposed to be any income tax, but the lawmakers, or you could say the left-leaning lawmakers, they want to find a way to sneak it in, to weasel it in, to say it's not income, it's excise, or it's a fund. And for those reasons, it really rubs me the wrong way, such that a lot of the voters, they really know that it's an income. They know it's going to come out of their payroll. The really rich voters know that it's going to come out of their capital gains. They know that it's an income. They know that it was a way to sneak around the Constitution of Washington State. So for those reasons, I'm definitely against those. Where was I going with that as well? Really, just one last thing I'd like to say is when it comes to the WA Cares and when it comes to the cap and trade, there's a lot of these things where I feel like there's a lot of the businesses, especially the big businesses, that are definitely going to get rich off of this. It's not foreign to me that when the WA Cares was enacted initially, everybody rushed to take out long-term care private insurance. I'm sure the long-term care private insurance companies got incredibly rich off of that. I'm sure the cap and trade companies are the companies that have to worry about the carbon tax. They're passing the money on to us. They're passing the costs on to us. The businesses are not stupid either. They see the laws in some way. They're trying to just figure out a way to get the money back into their pockets more effectively based on the laws. Something about that also rubs me the wrong way.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, these questions are a little bit shorter because it's more about just candidates. You can share why you like the candidate you're leaning toward. You don't have to go deeply into it. We are a little short on time. Which candidate are you leaning toward for governor and why? Aaron.
I just voted the primary thing about 1 week ago. Oh man, I'm trying to remember. I think I voted for the governor. I voted for the governor guy he definitely said he preferred Libertarian Party. And I believe he worked at Meta. I don't know why, but that stuck out to me as well. Honestly, the reason I think I chose him, I cannot remember his name for the life of me, unfortunately.
It's all good. I'm trying to think of the Libertarian Party candidate.
I can't remember, but honestly, when I was just going through all 28, I think it was, he was just the person who stuck out to me the most because, number one, he was a tech bro, and number two, he was like a libertarian, honestly. Okay. So going through the governor candidates, that's the guy who really said, he's the person that most represents me out of all these 28. That's why I'm going to vote for him.
Awesome. Jason, you.
Oh, man. So I have not voted in the primary yet. It's sitting on my kitchen table. I'm leaning Reichardt, honestly, just as like a protest vote. Like, this is my counterculture move.
Yeah. Iskra.
I really wish that he didn't have the name Mullet. There are people who brand politicians and... But, I had a long conversation with him recently, Mark Mullet. I am very, very impressed. It's important to me that a candidate for governor not be an autocrat, that they listen to their constituents, that they listen to alternative viewpoints, that they not be arrogant. I am livid at the way that our Bob Ferguson has approached his constituents, and he's lost the state billions, particularly on the suit against the native tribes, having to do with Indian fishing rights. I just think what he did there with that and Value Village disqualifies him to be a governor.
I've told Mark that he should lean into the mullet thing because
Okay.
mullets are back.
All right.
Eliav, which candidate, governor, and why?
Funny, half of our balloon crows mullets. They're like awesome, but
Okay,
wild.
They're back.
Rebrand.
Anyway, they're a bunch of
All
college
right.
guys. To be very honest and open, I have no idea who is running for governor in any way, shape, or form because they obviously have not done a good enough job of sending a single pamphlet to me, a single thing, a single place where I get any type of news. I couldn't even tell you who is on there until I heard Bob Ferguson. I was like, oh yeah, wasn't there a story about like some guy putting 3 other Bob Fergusons on the ballot? And I thought that was hilarious. But outside of that, we've always gone as a Democratic governor in this state. So are there 2 of them? So even if there's 2 of them, great. If we had ranked choice voting, I'd be really excited, which we do at the local level for city council. But since we don't, I can't choose between 1 or 2. So it's really whoever gets the choice is the one that obviously I'll end up voting for in that case.
Yeah, great. Ian.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I'm tending to vote Reichert as well, just as a protest vote, because I think that a career cop would not necessarily be a bad thing in a state that is falling into lawlessness.
Okay, Otter.
Oh my God, who did I put on that ballot? I just submitted my ballot. I submit the ballot like the exact same day I got it.
There's a lot.
I think I put Bob Ferguson. I'm not sure about that one no more. I started doing a little bit more research. I was like, why is he so into the police? What are we doing? So I'm gonna change that. Whatever. If that ends up being the popular Democratic candidate, whatever. It's close enough. But that's how I really feel about voting Democrat anymore. It's close enough. But I would like somebody else now. I want to change my vote. Where do I do that? That's not possible.
Just the primary, so thankfully it doesn't fully
See.
count yet. Which candidate are you leaning towards for president and why?
See, when I first answered the survey, that question had a completely different answer. So I'm all right with Kamala Harris. Like I've been saying, I'm a leftist, so I don't expect any popular mainstream candidate to be into anything that I'm into. Because, I know I'm pretty fringe. Like, I have the self-awareness to say that. But Kamala Harris is, like I've said before, close enough. It's close enough. And also, I think I'm going to be the first person to say this. Well, I feel like I might have some echoes here. Trump disgusts me and makes my skin crawl. And if I ever have to hear that man one more time, I think I will scream. So, I will do anything. I would vote for a pile of bricks over ever letting Trump be president ever again. So,
Ian, president. Who are you leaning toward?
I'm not really leaning anywhere. There's all of the candidates are pretty awful at the moment, and it's Washington State, so I know we're probably going to go blue, no matter what. So even if I vote independent or Republican, it won't make a difference really. So,
Eliav?
I have not been excited about any candidates for president for a while. It was kind of a breath of fresh air that at least we didn't have someone who was in their 80s who had the opportunity to possibly run the country. I think my favorite was the Colbert Report this week, or Stephen Colbert, where he said Republicans were really frustrated that Biden stepped down and they have a new candidate, and he said, "Don't worry, you can also not choose an old guy." So.
Iskra?
I'm voting for the younger one.
Hey, Jason?
Oh, yeah. I will likely vote third party for the first time because I actually think it is a moderating force in this election, which I believe is the first time. My brother voted a third party last election, and I thought he was absolutely insane. And how could he dare risk putting the orange man back in office because he lives in Georgia? But I feel like now it would at least just be a signal that We need to come together. We need to find a balance. And I believe the third party candidate is actually more representative of that point of view than the two parties that have just pandered to their primary bases.
Aaron, president.
Yeah, not sure if he'll be written on the ballot, but definitely Robert F. Kennedy Jr. A lot of things he stands for that I definitely like, against the big government, against big business, really for the environment, against big pharma. A lot of things that he stands for in that perspective that I like. And honestly, it would be really refreshing to vote for someone again outside of the dichotomy. I know that when there's an incumbent like Biden was, a lot of times that incumbent is kind of auto-tracked into being the Democrat or the Republican nominee. But what really rubbed me the wrong way with how Kamala Harris came to be, there's absolutely no reason why when Biden stepped down, they could have had another primary very quickly, or some way to gather information from the people about who do we want to have from a Democratic perspective on the Democratic ticket. I mean, even though Trump pretty much stormed through the Republican primary process, they at least had Republican primaries. There is something that really rubs me the wrong way about we were given option A and option B again, and they were kind of auto chosen by the people at the political top.
Okay, I think this might be our last question, although I'm thinking this could be short and we might have time for one more, but have you thought about any reactions or plans if the election outcome is different than you hope?
I don't understand the question 100%.
Some people say I'm going to move out of the country or things like that.
Take it to the streets.
Or move out of the state if the capital gains tax is passed. Things
I
like
understand.
That. Yeah.
The only thing that I would say 100 absolute % is that if the WA cares becomes optional, I will absolutely opt out of the WA cares.
Sorry, and so this question is if it's different than your hopes. I think you're going to vote. So if yeah, it's okay if there's nothing. I was thinking I don't know if maybe there won't be much from this crew. Yeah. So Jason, same question. Any plans or reactions?
Nothing based solely off the election. I think if, all of the ballot initiatives fail and a opportunity presents itself, I will feel less tethered to Washington.
Yeah. Iskra, same question.
I'm much more interested in the local picture. Yeah. I wouldn't plan to move.
Elio.
Both parties are always choosing the candidate for us either way. Whoever ends up becoming president, and I'm going to focus on making sure that we have open primaries in as many states as possible, and that we have ranked choice voting so that we all get an opportunity in order to get moderate candidates in that work for everyone.
Awesome. Ian.
Well, yeah, I'm probably not moving for now, but if Washington State continues on its current path of no thought of the people that are on the smaller side of things and just plowing through, I will definitely consider going to another state where we are not trampling on people's rights.
Otter.
So I feel like, okay, no matter what happens, I am a rich white person. I will be just fine. I'm just going to say that right now. I'll be fine. No matter what happens. I could take out my piercings. I could pretend to be straight for 10 minutes. We'll be okay. Okay? We'll be okay. So I can't say that I would do something so extreme as to move out of the country. I will not be very pleased if we elect someone I don't like for governor. I'm more concerned with the local elections. But on a presidential level, generally I'll be okay. I just know that about myself and my family.
As I expected, we have a little bit more time. So I'm going to ask 12. Is that okay? Okay, great. Perfect. What do you want media to talk about during this election season? Otter.
Oh, Lord. Honestly, I want them to stop plastering Trump's face everywhere. That'd be really, really nice for about 10 minutes. I don't know why you guys are so obsessed with him. Just leave him alone. It's feeding his ego. Just leave him alone. Let him go die in a corner. We're good, okay? But anyway, I would really like them to talk about what are we doing to combat environmental issues? What are we doing to further human rights? What are we doing on a physical level, what are we doing to make the lives of our constituents, of our country, of our people, what are we doing physically to make that better? I want to hear about that. I want to hear what's going on in Congress. I want to hear about that. I don't care about, like, I don't care what Trump does. I don't care at all. I'm just so sick of hearing about that, man. Can you tell? But I just want them to talk about what they're physically doing and what is happening in Congress to make our lives better. And if that's nothing, that's crazy, because we have a thing called voting, so you're going to say bye-bye. So, but, yeah.
Ian, what do you want media to talk about during this election season?
I think paying attention to the candidates' records and actually talking about what they have done before now would be rather important. I mean, haven't heard almost anything about any of the candidates for governor. I mean, if I didn't do my own research, I wouldn't know half the stuff about Ferguson, about what he's done under Inslee. I wouldn't know all that much about Reichert. I wouldn't know about any of the other candidates because nobody's really been talking about them. And just in general, Attorney General, what are those candidates about? I haven't heard anything about them really at all. There's been little snippets of media, but in general, it's very, I would say, muted. It seems like we're just going to pass these people through and you get what you get.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I was surprised because I'm young, I guess, into politics as I just started getting wildly involved. And I remember meeting Betsy, who is running for, I believe, governor back in Oregon a couple of years ago. Yeah. And I was hanging out with Andrew Yang, and we were putting together an event around talking about ranked choice voting, just trying to help people understand. And Betsy had come and he had backed her, and he goes, this won't be in the newspaper. I was like, why? This is news. Don't you reach out to them? How do they find out about this cool big deal? And he goes, well, she flip-flopped on gun rights last week, and then she flipped back. And that's where I started to realize that the media has very specific things that you're supposed to do or not do based on who owns it. And they say, don't talk about this candidate, don't talk about RFK, don't talk about this person. And as much as what I really, I guess, wish the media would do is I want them to talk about the way that as America of how we win. And I know I've said this a couple of times, but you look at Murkowski in Alaska, you look at the only reason she won was because they had the opportunity to have ranked choice voting pick someone else. The only reason Palin lost to some random senator that I still don't know his name, and I doubt most Alaskans even do.
Mary Peltola.
Yeah, Peltola. He was completely unknown only because of that. And I think that there's a future there if the media can step away from the duopoly of going, hey, the Democrats and Republicans have all this control. What if we take that back and hold people accountable? And the only way to hold them accountable is some systemic change to the system. And that's why I've been very much, that's my focus and what I want to see. And I think the more people hear about it, especially in Washington State, if you're a Republican in Washington State and you find out you can have a voice, that is huge. If you're a Democrat in Alabama, you find out that's a big deal. Now our votes count again. And that's where what I want to see in the media is around that. And the final piece would really be any person saying the legislation that they want is to make sure that all senators have a cap on the number of years. And the easiest way to pass that is just to make sure it says anyone currently in the Senate, they can stay as many years as they want, but anyone new has 2 term limits, and they'd all pass it. I'd vote for anyone who does that, because then you could, really solve some of the larger problems of our country.
Iskra, what do you want media to talk about?
I, too, am very, very tired of hearing about Donald Trump. And I think the media obsession with Donald Trump, which crosses the Republican and Democratic parties, has been monumentally destructive. I think that the Democrats made a terrible error in putting all of their focus, particularly during pandemic, on national issues and completely abandoning focus on their local communities. That is why we are in this public safety crisis. So I want to see a very completely different kind of coverage than we've had, in depth, asking really difficult questions. To me, one of the very most important offices that I'm sure none of you have thought about. If you don't know who you voted for governor, it's going to be very hard to get excited about the lands commissioner. I have met Dave Updegrove on a hike through Legacy Forest that changed my whole perspective on forests. I think he's incredible. Even before he was running for office, I left a message at his office when he was in King County. He called me back, talked for half an hour. I think that the popular Democratic vote is going to go to DePoe. I don't remember his first name. He's Native American, and he's entirely backed by builders and timber industries. And Dave Updegrove has said he wouldn't take any money from timber. I want to see in-depth coverage about what does it mean to be really environmental. Is it environmental to clear cut our forests? Is it environmental to use up our hydroelectric for, as you mentioned earlier, the data centers that are communities all over the United States are starting to say no to them. Why don't we say no? I also think that the two most important local races are for the 43rd, because Capitol Hill and CHOP, that whole upheaval and craziness, that gave Republicans ammunition for decades to demonize the Democratic Party and turn people against the Democratic Party. Andrea Suarez has my vote. I think she's a very important candidate. I want to see interviews with her. I want to see debates between her and Sean Scott. And I want to see a lot more focus on the at-large city council race.
Okay, great. I just did a story about the commissioner's race, and so I'm glad. Part of me is like, is anybody paying attention to this?
Yes!
So thank you for paying attention to that.
The tree people care!
I know. Jason, same question. What do you want media to talk about during election season?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different types of media. I think from a format standpoint, I've all but abandoned any kind of network news just because I don't think you can truly understand an issue in 30 seconds in between drug commercials. So I think long format, deep, in-depth conversations. Like, I'll listen to 3-hour podcasts, and I want you to be pushed. I want you to be challenged. I like, Weekend Review is one of my favorites for KUOW because I do appreciate the fact that you generally have people of opposing points of view, and they respectfully discuss their points and counterpoints. And we need more of that. We need to understand that the people that don't necessarily agree or vote the way that we do or have the right yard sign are not evil people. And that we probably agree on 95% of stuff. And it's a handful of things that if people really sat down and talked about it for 20 minutes, they'd probably be okay. And I'd like to see more of that.
Awesome. Aaron?
Yeah, pretty much just echoing what everybody else here has said. More focus on the local, less on the national. Everybody has their opinion on Trump, Biden, Kamala Harris because they're very sexy figures. They're very polarizing figures in a way, I would say. Just driving on the way over here, as Iskra mentioned, there was a lot on the news about the Israel strike in Iran or Hamas or something like that. And then I heard the exact land commissioner bit that you had about how it's going to flip Republican instead of Democrat or something along those lines. So, but it really struck me that on the whole 45-minute drive over here was like 40 minutes about Israel, Hamas, something international, something about Trump or Harris, and then maybe like 3 or 2 minutes about land commissioner from you. So that imbalance really struck a chord in me, and I'd really like to see more about the local, the attorney general, the governor, everything that's going to be on the state, the city ballots.
Awesome. It was actually only 1 minute. I hope my boss listens to this and gives me more time.
Go trees.
But yeah, thank you all. This is I think we're at time, and I think we're about ready to wrap up. I really appreciate all of you coming out here and talking and sharing your opinions without fear or favor with all of us. And I thought that it was really good vibes, even though a lot of folks said things that others of you maybe disagreed with. So I really appreciate your attitude and just your candor. Thank you.
Thank you.